Happy Saturday, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. I want to show you the cover of the new holiday mini catalog. I can't show you the inside yet, but I wanted to give you a little peek of the cover. And the products I'm using today are included in this catalog. And I will show you that bundle in a second. If you would like to get a copy of the catalog and see it before it can be shown, you can fill out the catalog request form in the description of this video. It's also included in my other videos, and I will send you a free copy of the catalog. The only thing that I ask is that you are not working with another demonstrator, because if you are, then you should get your catalog from them, and you are required to be in the United States. So let me show you the bundle that we're going to use today. It's called Translucent Florals. And it has some gorgeous red rubber stamps. Sorry for the glare there, I'll tilt that. And then we have dies that coordinate with the stamps, as well as some other dies that you can use to create individual flowers with some smaller flower shapes, and then the stamens that go in the center. And those are really fun. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me grab a piece of scrap paper here, because for our first card, which looks like this, I'm going to need to do some flicking with a marker. So I'm going to set that off over here off to the side a little bit so you can still see it while we're creating. So we have our typical A2 card base. This is gray granite, and I've gone ahead and folded that. Let me grab my bone folder. And then we have a panel of basic white. This is cut to 4 1/4 and 5 5 1/2. And I'm just going to take my gray granite, my dark gray granite, and just do a little bit of flicking on the card base here. You can skip this step if you don't have the marker, or if you don't like this technique. It's really whatever you like. So let's go ahead and adhere down our panel, but first I need to find my adhesive. Whoops. So I'm just going to use my Tombow because, and I mentioned this in my other videos, I like to have the freedom to make sure that my panel is straight. And this gives me a little bit of time to wiggle it around. Now, if you prefer Stampin' Seal, if you don't press down your paper too hard, you can get the panel back up if you're careful. I would not suggest trying that with Seal Plus or with something like Tear and Tape. You might have a more difficult time. Okay, so next I need to grab my little bin of die cuts. I have pre-cut pretty much everything just to save some time. And so the color palette for this card is Berry Burst, Lost Lagoon. Sorry, I'm going to pick this up or it's going to take me forever. And Blackberry Bliss. So I've gone ahead and I have stamped and die cut all the little pieces that we'll need for this card. And I have stamped them off. Now you don't have to do this, but I kind of wanted a softer effect. So the first thing that I'm going to do is adhere this stem of leaves to the card. And when I do cards like this where I'm making a bouquet, I don't necessarily stick everything down 100%. Oftentimes that's because I know I'm going to be adding other elements, and I want to be able to stick things underneath, or because I like when they lift a little bit off the paper. I think it just adds some fun dimension. If you would like them to be securely stuck down, then feel free to apply adhesive to the entire back surface. Okay, next I'm going to take one of these smaller flowers here, and we are going to tuck that behind these leaves here. Okay, I've got some glue on my hands. I really should keep maybe like a damp rag or something to wipe the glue off. I'm going to grab my dimensionals here, and we are going to pop up this larger flower. And you'll notice I'm not covering a lot of the surface with dimensionals because I'm going to put I can't speak today. I'm going to put some elements underneath, and I can always go back and add dimensionals if I want to, and by just, gingerly picking up the bottom portion of that flower. Well, doesn't want to stay down. Okay, then we're going to adhere our next smaller flower that is stamped in Berry Burst. And then we have just a single leaf here. So there is the stem that has quite a few leaves on it. And then we have one stamp that is just a single leaf. And then we have one that is double. See what I mean? I put the dimensional there. There we go. But it's not going to matter. And then I'm just going to put another one under this piece over here, this petal over here, just to give it a little more stability. So there we have our bouquet. It's probably not the correct term for it, but that is what came into my head. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stamp the sentiment. And this is just something that I am going to cut down once I have it stamped. And with red rubber stamps, this is always tricky because it doesn't matter how straight you think they are. Sometimes they aren't going to stamp straight. So we're going to hope for the best. So I always start with a bigger piece of paper. And this way, I can stamp around the edges. Now, what I probably should have done was stamped this more in the middle. That would have been easier to trim, but it saves me from having to waste a bunch of paper. So even though I feel like I am stamping this straight, like when I look in my block, I'm using the bottom part of the stamp to eyeball if it's straight, it still stamps crooked. So I'm just going to do the best I can with my paper trimmer to cut that straight. So I'm going to bring my paper trimmer in. And I'm going to try to do the bottom first. And I'm just lining up the bottom using the edge of where the track starts here. So that's kind of my trick to line up, get things straight. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a shot if you are a crooked stamper like I am. And that, I can't pick anything. I don't have long nails because I can't pick anything up, but I have short nails and I still can't pick anything up. Go figure. Okay, so there we have our sentiment. And this is going to be popped up as well. And I'm going to use some mini dimensionals for this. I'm just grabbing my black ones because those are what are closest to me. And you could leave your sentiment straight, or you could cut the ends at an angle. I'm going to leave these straight on this one, just so we can see the difference. I think it's actually fairly centered on the strip of paper. Okay, I'm not going to peel that off. I didn't need them that close together, but I'm not going to try to peel it off. Okay, almost done with that. I think that's straight. And then for embellishments, I am going to use my adhesive back sparkle gems, which have been very well loved. And I'm going to use silver for this card. Just going to get my putty prepared. And there we have card number 1. So once all the stamping and die cutting is done, it comes together pretty quick. And then here's the sample that has a dimensional backing stuck to it, but has the sentiment done a little differently. The strip is a little bit wider, and then it's trimmed off at the ends at an angle. And also on the sample card, I did not stamp off the rich razzleberry sprigs. I kept them full strength, but I think you could go either way. So there is card 1. Let me set that aside and do a quick pickup, which means throwing everything in a bin that's next to me. And our next card is going to be this one. So what I have done for this card is I just have a upside down card base. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 A2 card base. This is thick basic white. And then I have taken a panel, and this is 3 3/4 by 5, or that's what it started as. And all these measurements will be on my blog. So if you can't remember something, don't worry, it'll be on there. And I've taken one of the dies from the Around the Bend set, and I've cut this at an angle. And then I've gone ahead and adhered these pieces to the angle of this panel. So I have these pre-cut as well, and the color palette for this card is Fresh Freesia, Soft Seafoam, and Misty Moonlight. And then I have used some of the gold festive pearls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink blend some Fresh Freesia below this panel here before I adhere it. And I am going to mark where I want the ink. It's okay if it goes above the panel, but I want to make sure that I get it down far enough so that I can see the ink once I adhere the panel. So I'm just going to make a couple marks here at the end points and the center. So I know where to apply my ink. And I really do prefer to blend on thick basic white. I think it gives it a much more airbrushed look. And because there isn't a coating, you don't tend to get those blobs. Now, the blobs also depend on how much pressure you're applying to the brush and how you're holding it, but you can avoid that usually if you use thick. I also feel like with thick, and this may not work for every single color, but I also think you have the ability to build it up a little bit slower if that's what you're looking to do. Okay, so let's get that set aside. So there we have our panel, and our panel is going to be popped up. And I also need to stamp happy birthday on my panel. And yes, these are red rubber stamps. So you know what that means? There is the risk of stamping crooked. And there we have happy birthday. Okay, so let's grab some foam sheet. I am going to have to get a new chair. I just can't with this squeaky thing. And you can use dimensionals for this, absolutely. But that is very time consuming for a video. So I am just going to use a foam sheet to save time. And of course, use what you have. And you don't have to pop this up. This is completely optional. But I really liked the look that it gave. Now with foam sheets, you have to be careful because if you press them down too soon, you're not going to be able to get it back up. Okay, there we go. So we have our sheet down, and we are also going to do some flicking with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that now. And then we can go ahead and assemble. So I'm going to put the leaves down first. And then I will put down this flower. Just wanted to make sure that it covered the stem well enough. If it doesn't cover the stem when you lay it down, go ahead and cut the stem off. It's not going to show anyway. And we'll just tuck that under there and just make sure that when you tuck the flower under, that it's not going over the edge if you plan to mail it, because otherwise it's not going to fit in the envelope. And then we have the little one here. We're just going to kind of use as an accent. And then I'm going to take some gold pearls from the Festive Pearls, which is really funny if you're looking at this packaging. I noticed this the other day. It's labeled as red and green adhesive backed pearls. Well, these aren't all red and green, and that's actually not the correct name, but I thought that was pretty funny. I was making a supply list and looked down just to make sure that I had the correct name and was like, wait a minute, that's not the right name. All right, so there we have our second card. And there's the sample that I made. All right, card number 3. Now, card number 3 is going to use some background stamping. So, making our own background with the stamps. So, here's what the card's going to look like when we're finished. And this has a combination of, I always want to call it petal pink. It's petal pink. Sometimes I call it pale pink, sometimes I call it petal pink. So petal pink, pretty peacock, and calypso coral. And I need to cut a card base really quick because for some reason I only cut a panel. So I'm going to cut this from thick basic white. Go ahead and try to pick it up. Okay, so for this panel, we're going to go ahead and stamp the pattern, and then I'm going to take one of the Stitched with Whimsy dies, and I'm going to cut that little pattern into it. Now, some people get confused with these dies because the Stitched with Whimsy's dies, they don't actually cut anything. They make a design on whatever you use them on. So keep that in mind. And I think, I do have them. So here's what oh my gosh, dimensional backings everywhere. I know people can relate. Let me try to, okay, so this is what they look like. So when you put them on a piece of paper and run them through the die cut machine, the center doesn't cut out, nothing cuts out. It's just they make this design on your piece of paper. And so keep that in mind because I know some people get them and think, wait a minute, it's not cutting. Nope, it's not supposed to. So we're going to start with this stamp, and I like to always start in the middle when I'm doing backgrounds. So we will have our petal pink, we don't need that anymore, and our calypso coral and our pretty peacock. I know those are partially off screen, and I apologize. When I do this and make my own what I call designer series paper, I like to open all my ink pads. Otherwise, I don't have my ink pads open all the time. And then everything here is stamped off except the petal pink. So just keep that in mind. So the larger flower is going to be petal pink, and I'm just going to stamp that in the middle to give myself an idea of where I'm going to stamp everything else. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered because it's going to be covered partially anyway. So then I want to stamp my leaves here, and these are stamped off. Now sometimes I will do this on a piece of copy paper so that I can see what it looks like before I start wasting a bunch of white paper. All right. Then I'm going to go back to my petal pink. And I recommend also changing the direction of your stamp when you do this to give some interest. All right, Calypso Coral. Okay. So that's what our back panel is going to look like. And then I have gone ahead and I have pre-cut this banner from the Nested Essentials, and that's just going to go in the center here. And as I did with the other cards, I'm going to use my gray granite and just do some flicking. Now, one of the reasons that I like doing this is because it's going to help fill in any gaps that you have on your paper. You can tell by the sample that my pattern is not exactly the same. And that is just because I didn't position my stamps exactly the same. So I am going to go ahead and set these somewhere else so I don't stick my arms in them. And then we are going to not cut, what can you call it when it's not cutting? I am going to use one of the Stitch with Whimsies dies just to make this border around the outside. So there will be a brief intermission while I go to my die cutting machine. Okay, so after running it through the die cutting machine, here is what we have. We have that neat stitched element on the outside. So we'll go ahead and adhere this down to our card base. And this is going to be popped up. So I'm going to grab some dimensionals here. I think right now, stamping a background is my favorite technique. I just love the different looks you can get. Now, it can be a bit challenging depending on the size of your stamps and how well you're able to fit in all of the pieces. Sometimes it's nice to use a stamp set that has a really like a smaller element. For example, I could have used the small stamp here to fill in some of those empty spots, or maybe the stamen stamp, but I really wanted to keep it to just 3 colors, and so I was kind of limited to, I suppose I could have used one of the colors I already have, but I didn't want to because I'm particular. Okay, so there we have our banner from the Nested Essentials, and then I am going to tie a bow with some of our linen thread. And we are going to hope for the best here. We're going to hope that I don't have to fiddle with this for too long. This video is going to be 3 hours long just with me trying to do this bow. So I'm not even going to worry about it, which is a big fat lie because I am going to worry about it. So here we go. There is our first one and our second one and our third one. So I hope you got some fun ideas of what you can do with this translucent floral bundle. I think it's a little bit underwhelming in the catalog, but it is very, very pretty and very versatile. So I hope you got some great ideas. I will be back next week with some more new products. So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.